The world knew Freddie Mercury as a rock god, but behind the glittering costumes and thunderous applause lay a secret that would torment him until his final breath. In 1991, 3 months before his death, Freddie Mercury sat in his Garden Lodge mansion, staring at a letter he had written but would never send. It was addressed to his father Bomi and contained the words that had been choking him for over 2 decades. What Freddie couldn't know was that his father had been carrying his own devastating secret about their relationship, one that would only surface after both men were gone forever. Family dinners at the modest Feltham home had become increasingly unbearable for Freddie Mercury throughout the 1970s. Bomi was a traditional Parsi father who expected his son to conform to societal norms, and he watched with growing unease as young Farouk transformed into the flamboyant performer the world knew as Freddie Mercury. The platform shoes, sequined costumes, and theatrical performances clashed violently with everything Bomi held sacred about family honor and community respect. For the Parsi community in London, maintaining respectability was everything. Bomi worked as a cashier at the British Airways catering department, a modest job that nonetheless provided stability and respect within their immigrant community. Every evening he would return home expecting traditional family values to be upheld: sons who showed respect, daughters who maintained modesty, and above all behavior that wouldn't bring shame upon the family name within their tight-knit Zoroastrian community. Mary Austin would later recall how Freddie would spend hours preparing for family visits, not just choosing conservative clothes, but literally rehearsing a different personality. The rock god would vanish, replaced by the dutiful Parsi's son his father expected. This transformation was so dramatic that when Mary first witnessed it, she was genuinely shocked by how completely Freddie could suppress his authentic self. The preparation wasn't just physical. Freddie would actually practice speaking in softer tones, moderating his natural theatrical gestures, and even changing his posture to appear more submissive and traditional. The family dinner table became a theatrical stage where Freddie performed the role of his life, not as the commanding frontman of Queen, but as the obedient son who lived in constant fear of disappointing his father. Every conversation topic was a potential minefield. Music career discussions had to be carefully framed as temporary pursuits rather than serious artistic endeavors. His growing success with Queen was downplayed to seem like lucky accidents rather than the result of raw talent and relentless ambition that was driving him toward international stardom. Cher Bulsara, Freddie's mother, possessed the intuitive understanding that mothers often have about their children. She could see the terrible strain these performances placed on her son, but within the traditional Parsi family structure, challenging her husband's authority was unthinkable. She watched helplessly as her vibrant, creative son slowly deflated during each family gathering, his natural exuberance dimmed by the constant need to monitor and modify every aspect of his personality. But what Freddie was hiding went far deeper than his stage persona. The breaking point began in 1973, during Queen's early recording sessions for their debut album. Freddie would arrive at family dinners straight from the studio, still buzzing with creative energy from hours of perfecting vocal arrangements and experimenting with operatic techniques that would later define Queen's sound. But the moment he stepped into his childhood home, that energy had to be completely suppressed. The passionate artist who had just spent the day creating Keep Yourself Alive had to become Farouk, the quiet son who spoke respectfully about getting a proper job to appease his father's concerns. Cher Bulsara noticed that her son's hands would actually shake during these transitions. The psychological effort required to switch between his authentic self and his family persona was taking a visible physical toll. She began to understand that this wasn't simply teenage rebellion or artistic temperament. This was a young man being forced to deny the very core of his identity in order to maintain family harmony. The strain became particularly evident during the Christmas season of 1974, when Queen's second album was gaining momentum in the music charts. Freddie's natural excitement about the band's growing success had to be carefully modulated into humble gratitude for his luck in the music business. When relatives asked about his career, career, he found himself downplaying achievements that represented months of grueling work, creative breakthroughs, and the realization of dreams he had harbored since childhood. Bomi's concerns weren't entirely unreasonable from his perspective. The entertainment industry was notoriously unstable, and he genuinely feared that his son was pursuing a path that would lead to financial insecurity and social marginalization. In the conservative Parsi community, success was measured by steady employment, family stability, and community respect, none of which seemed compatible with the chaotic world of rock music that was beginning to consume Freddie's life. The tension reached a critical point in 1975 when Queen's success began attracting mainstream media attention. Bomi would read newspaper articles about his son's performances with a mixture of pride and deep concern. The androgynous imagery, the theatrical excess, and the increasingly flamboyant stage presence that made Freddie famous were incomprehensible to a man raised in strict Parsi tradition where masculinity was defined by restraint, dignity, and adherence to prescribed social roles. Television appearances became particularly problematic. When Queen performed on Top of the Pops or other music programs, Freddie knew that members of the Parsi community would be watching. The knowledge that his father's friends and associates were witnessing his theatrical performances added another layer of anxiety to what should have been career triumphs. Every success in his public life seemed to create deeper rifts in his private family relationships. 1975 marked another seismic shift in Freddie's life, the beginning of his sexual awakening and the realization that he was attracted to both men and women. This discovery came at the worst possible time, just as Queen was gaining serious commercial success and family scrutiny was intensifying. In Parsi culture, anything deviating from heterosexual norms was not just taboo, but grounds for complete social ostracism. Freddie found himself carrying a double burden, hiding his artistic identity and concealing his sexual orientation from the people whose love he craved most desperately. The weight of this secret was crushing. During this period, Freddie began experiencing what would now be recognized as anxiety attacks before family visits. Mary Austin, who was becoming increasingly aware of Freddie's internal struggles, noticed that he would sometimes spend entire nights pacing around their shared flat, rehearsing conversations with his father that would never happen. The fantasy discussions always involved Freddie explaining his life, his choices, and his identity, with his father responding with understanding and acceptance. Reality, however, remained devastatingly different. Jim Hutton's memoirs, published years later, would reveal the full extent of how these family dynamics affected Freddie's psychological well-being. After family visits, Freddie would fall into deep depressions that could last for days. He would return to Garden Lodge and immediately release all the emotions he had suppressed during his time playing the perfect son. Sometimes he would play piano for hours, working through complex emotional pieces that would never be recorded or performed. Other times he would retreat into complete silence that even Mary Austin found difficult to penetrate. The discovery of his bisexuality created a new layer of complexity in every family interaction. Simple questions about his personal life became loaded with danger. When relatives asked about girlfriends or marriage prospects, Freddie had to navigate not just the normal challenges of discussing romantic relationships, but the much deeper terror of accidentally revealing something that could destroy his family relationships forever. During the summer of 1976, at a family gathering celebrating his cousin's wedding, Freddie experienced what he would later describe to Mary as his darkest moment. Surrounded by relatives discussing traditional marriage, children, and family continuity, he felt completely isolated, despite being physically present with people who claimed to love him. The realization that he could never share his authentic self with his family, that he would forever be performing a role rather than living as himself, hit him with devastating clarity. But this was only the beginning of his emotional isolation. The pressure of maintaining these multiple deceptions began affecting his artistic work. Songs from this period, particularly tracks that would later appear on A Day at the Races, contained coded references to identity struggles and the pain of living a double life. Somebody to Love, while ostensibly a song about romantic longing, actually contained deeper themes about the search for unconditional acceptance, the kind of love that wouldn't disappear if the truth about his sexuality sexuality were revealed. Between 1981 and 1985, Freddie's time in Munich created an even wider chasm between his authentic self and his family persona. The freedom he experienced in Germany's more liberal atmosphere made returning to London's family obligations feel like entering a prison. Munich represented everything that Freddie couldn't be at home: sexually liberated, artistically adventurous, and completely uninhibited by family expectations or community judgment. His friendship with Barbara Valentine, the wild nights at clubs like New York Disco and Oxengarten, and his exploration of his sexuality created a parallel life that was completely invisible to his parents. In Munich, Freddie could be openly bisexual, could experiment with leather and club culture, could stay out until dawn and sleep until afternoon without anyone questioning his lifestyle. The contrast with his family life became so extreme that he sometimes felt like he was living as two entirely different people. Barbara Valentine later revealed in interviews that Freddie would often talk about his family during their Munich adventures, but always with a deep sadness. He would say he loved them, but they would never love the real him, she recalled. It was like he was grieving for relationships that were still alive, but could never be authentic. The pain of this separation was intensified by the knowledge that his parents had no idea what he was experiencing. They couldn't even grieve for the distance that was growing between them, because they weren't aware it existed. The Munich years also coincided with some of Queen's most experimental and controversial music. Albums like Hot Space reflected Freddie's exploration of different musical styles, but they also represented his growing confidence in challenging expectations, something he could do professionally but never personally with his family. The irony was devastating. He could transform rock music and challenge millions of fans to accept new sounds, but he couldn't find the courage to be himself with the people whose opinions mattered most. Mary Austin observed that Freddie stopped mentioning his father entirely during this period. When she would ask about family visits, he would change the subject or make excuses about being too busy with recording schedules. "I'm far enough away now that I won't disappoint him," he would say, words that revealed the profound loneliness eating away at his soul. This geographic distance allowed him to avoid the constant emotional turmoil of family visits, but it also meant that the gap between his authentic self and his family relationships continued to widen. But the ultimate test of this fractured relationship was still to come. The success of Queen's Hot Space Tour in 1982 brought Freddie to a new level of international fame, but it also intensified his family dilemma. Newspaper reviews of his performances were becoming more explicit about his theatrical androgyny and stage sexuality. Dance moves that thrilled audiences were described in ways that made Freddie cringe when he imagined his father reading them. The very elements of his performance that were making him a global icon were the same elements that were creating deeper shame about his family relationships. During this period, Freddie began what Mary Austin would later describe as his preparation rituals before family visits. These weren't just about choosing conservative clothing. They involved completely altering his physical presence. He would practice walking with less fluid movement, speaking in more measured tones, and even changing his posture to appear more traditionally masculine. The psychological effort required for these transformations was exhausting, and Mary could see the toll it was taking on his mental health. When Jim Hutton entered Freddie's life in 1985, the complexity of family deception reached unprecedented heights. Freddie was no longer just hiding his bisexuality or concealing his Munich adventures. He was concealing a serious same-sex relationship that was becoming the most important personal connection in his life. During family visits, Jim had to be completely erased from Freddie's existence, explained away as household staff, when his presence absolutely couldn't be avoided. The 1987 AIDS diagnosis added a third layer to Freddie's web of deception. Now he was hiding his sexuality, his relationship with Jim, and his terminal illness from his family. The physical changes, weight loss, fatigue, and increasing medication dependence, had to be explained away as the result of touring exhaustion and studio pressures. Each family visit became a carefully choreographed performance where Freddie had to conceal not just who he was, but the fact that he was dying. The medical appointments, the experimental treatments, the growing collection of medications that were keeping him alive, all of this had to remain completely invisible to his family. Dr. Gordon Atkinson, Freddie's physician, later revealed that the stress of maintaining these secrets was actually accelerating the progression of his illness. The psychological toll of triple deception was compromising his immune system at the very time time when mental and emotional stability were crucial for his physical survival. Dr. Atkinson's medical reports explicitly linked Freddie's deteriorating immune system to the psychological stress of maintaining these multiple deceptions. Family visits became so traumatic that they were actually contributing to his physical decline, yet he couldn't bring himself to stop going. The doctor recommended reducing family contact, but Freddie refused, explaining that losing his family relationships entirely would be worse than the stress of maintaining the deceptions. Jim Hutton's memoirs provide heartbreaking details about how the AIDS diagnosis affected Freddie's family anxieties. After receiving his test results, Freddie's first concern wasn't about his own mortality. It was about what would happen if his family discovered the truth. "They'll know everything," he told Jim. "They'll know I'm gay, they'll know about us, and they'll know I'm dying. I can't do that to them." The idea of his family experiencing all of these revelations simultaneously was more frightening to him than death itself. The medication schedule required for AIDS treatment in the late 1980s was complex and demanding. Freddie had to take dozens of pills daily, many with severe side effects that caused nausea, fatigue, and visible physical changes. Before every family visit, he would carefully plan which medications he could skip temporarily to avoid side effects that might raise questions. This dangerous practice often left him feeling worse during and after family gatherings, creating a vicious cycle where the effort to hide his illness was actually making the illness worse. But even as his body was failing, the most devastating revelation was yet to come. Mary Austin became Freddie's co-conspirator in maintaining these family deceptions, but the role was destroying her as well. She had to remember which lies had been told to which family members, had to coordinate cover stories with Jim Hutton, and had to watch the person she had once been closest to slowly disappearing behind layers of necessary fiction. The weight of keeping these secrets while watching Freddie deteriorate was almost unbearable. The cruelest irony was that Bomi and Sora could sense that something was wrong with their son, but their questions only made him retreat further into deception. When they expressed concern about his appearance or health, Freddie would respond with elaborate explanations about touring schedules, studio pressures, and the demands of international fame. These lies required enormous mental energy to maintain consistently, energy that his failing body could barely spare. Between 1988 and 1991, Freddie wrote dozens of letters to his father that he never mailed. These letters, discovered by Mary Austin after his death, provide the most heartbreaking insight into his internal torment. In one, he wrote, "Dear Papa, I wish I could tell you who I really am. I wish you could love me as I am, but I know this is impossible. You are a traditional Parsi father, and I am not the son you expected." These letters chronicled his entire journey, the childhood identity crisis, the conflicts arising from his musical career, and his struggles with sexual identity. But the most agonizing sections detailed his desperate attempts to earn his father's love by denying his authentic self. Freddie's sister, Kashmira, became an unwitting intermediary in 1989 when Freddie asked her to gauge their father's feelings. This put enormous pressure on Kashmira, who found herself trying to protect family harmony while supporting her brother's desperate need for acceptance. Kashmira began deliberately praising Freddie during family meals, highlighting his musical achievements and international recognition in hopes of warming Bomi's attitude. She could see that this strategy was having some effect. Their father was beginning to show glimpses of pride, though he never expressed it directly. Unknown to Freddie, Bomi had been secretly following his son's career much more closely than he ever revealed. Kashmira later disclosed that their father would secretly buy music magazines featuring Freddie, reading every article and studying every photograph. He was simultaneously proud and troubled, caught between his love for his son and the expectations of his traditional community. The most significant shift came after the 1985 Live Aid performance. When members of the Parsi community praised Freddie's performance, Bomi publicly expressed pride in his son for the first time. However, this change in attitude was never communicated to Freddie himself, but Bomi was harboring his own devastating secret about their relationship. In a shocking revelation that emerged years later, Kashmira disclosed that their father had actually sensed Freddie's sexual orientation, but had chosen to ignore rather than confront it. "Papa knew, but he didn't want to know," she explained. This willful blindness was Bomi's way of avoiding a confrontation he feared would destroy their relationship entirely. Freddie's last visit to see his father occurred in October 1991. By then he was so physically deteriorated that standing was difficult, but he insisted on making the trip. Jim Hutton later revealed that this meeting was different. Both men seemed to communicate their love without words, reaching a silent understanding that transcended their years of misunderstanding. Kashmira remembered the profound silence between father and son that day. They didn't speak, but their eyes said everything. It was like the walls they had built over the years had finally crumbled, she recalled. When Freddie Mercury died on November 24, 1991, Bomi Bulsora's grief was compounded by the discovery of his son's unmailed letters. Reading them completely shattered his understanding of their relationship. The letters revealed not a rebellious son rejecting family values, but a loving child desperately trying to earn acceptance while staying true to himself. One of the most devastating letters, written in 1989, contained these words: "Papa, if you are reading this, I am gone. Here I write everything I could never tell you. Forgive me for not being the traditional son you wanted, but know that I always loved you and did everything I could to earn your love." After reading these letters, Bomi spent his remaining years trying to honor his son's memory. Freddie's photographs began appearing on the family walls, and he openly spoke of his rock star son Freddie with unmistakable pride. In a rare 1994 interview, he admitted, "My son was braver than I was. He managed to carve his own path while I failed to support him." The letters revealed that Freddie had also sensed his father's internal struggle and had tried to bridge their gap through his music. Songs like Bohemian Rhapsody, We Are the Champions, and Somebody to Love contained coded messages to his father, attempts to communicate his love and need for acceptance through the only medium where he could be completely honest. As Bomi began listening to Queen's catalog with new understanding, he realized how many songs contained direct appeals to him. The Show Must Go On, recorded when Freddie was dying, contained the line, "My soul is painted like the wings of butterflies," a reference to the Parsi symbol and a final message to his heritage and family. Roger Taylor later confirmed that Freddie often spoke about writing music for his father's approval. After family visits, Freddie would come to the studio emotionally drained. "Some of our most powerful songs came from those sessions where he was processing the pain of feeling rejected by the person whose opinion mattered most." Freddie's death sparked significant discussions within the Parsi community about tradition versus acceptance. Bomi became an unexpected advocate for tolerance, using his son's story to encourage other families to embrace their children's differences. His transformation from a stern traditionalist to a proud father helped many other Parsi families navigate similar challenges. Throughout their 7-year relationship, Jim Hutton remained completely invisible to Freddie's family. This enforced secrecy was one of the most painful aspects of their relationship. In his memoirs, Jim wrote, "Freddie would say, 'I wish I could introduce you to my family. I wish you could come with me.' But we both knew it was impossible." The impact on Jim was profound. He was witnessing the man he loved slowly dying, yet he had to remain hidden from the very people who should have been supporting them both. This isolation made Freddie's final years even more lonely and painful. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. In 2019, nearly 3 decades after Freddie's death, Kashmira revealed that their father had actually written his own series of letters to Freddie, letters that were discovered in Bomi's possessions after his death in 2000. These letters, never sent, showed a father's desperate desire to connect with his son and his own regrets about their relationship. In one letter dated 1986, Bomi wrote, "My dear son, I see your success, and I am proud. I know I have not been the father you needed. I was raised to believe certain things were right and wrong, but watching you, I wonder if love should not be stronger than tradition." Another letter, written shortly after Love Aid, revealed Bomi's internal struggle. "The whole world celebrates you, and I sit in silence. I want to embrace you, to tell you how magnificent you are, but I don't know how to bridge the distance I have created." The parallel letters, Freddie's to his father and Bomi's to his son, reveal one of the most heartbreaking failures of communication in modern history. Two men who loved each other deeply, who both yearned for connection and understanding, never managed to break through their pride and fear to reach each other. Peter Freestone, Freddie's personal assistant, observed this tragedy firsthand. Freddie was like a god on stage, commanding thousands, but in front of his father, he became a vulnerable child again. And from what I learned later, his father was going through the exact same emotional struggle. When Bomi finally learned the truth about Freddie's AIDS diagnosis, the revelation hit him with devastating force. Not only had he failed to support his son emotionally, but he had been absent during the most frightening period of Freddie's life. The guilt was almost unbearable. Mary Austin Kristen later revealed that when she told Bomi about Freddie's diagnosis and his fears about dying alone and unloved, the elderly man collapsed in grief. He kept saying, I failed him, over and over. It was heartbreaking to witness. Today, the story of Freddie Mercury and his father serves as a powerful reminder of the cost of conditional love and the importance of family acceptance. Their tragedy resonates particularly strongly in communities where traditional values clash with individual identity and sexual orientation. The Freddie Mercury Foundation, established in 1992, became a vehicle for Bomi and Jer to honor their son's memory and support AIDS research. Bomi's involvement in the foundation represented his attempt to support in death the struggles he couldn't acknowledge in life. At its core, this story transcends the specific circumstances of one rock star and his traditional father. It speaks to the universal human need for acceptance from those we love most and the devastating consequences when fear and pride prevent us from offering that acceptance. Freddie's music continues to bring joy to millions, but his personal story serves as a cautionary tale about the words we leave unsaid, the love we fail to express, and the bridges we're too proud or too afraid to build. Both father and son carried their love to their graves, each believing the other could never understand or accept them. In the end, the greatest tragedy wasn't Freddie's early death from AIDS, but the fact that two people who loved each other so deeply spent decades believing that love wasn't strong enough to overcome their differences. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we're most afraid to have, and that acceptance and love, when finally offered, are never too late to matter, even if they come after death. The letters they wrote but never sent stand as monuments to missed opportunities and the price of silence in the face of love. Their story continues to inspire families around the world to choose understanding over judgment and love over tradition before it's too late to make that choice matter.